Hello viewers, welcome to this segment of the program. It is Economic Insights and I'm your host Paul Kingsley. Now in continuation with the ongoing reports we are doing on housing deficits in Nigeria, today we are spotlighting a company that are doing so well in the real estate sector. I'm talking of Savvy Real Estate Limited, and with us is the Managing Director, CEO, is Mr. Ayo Lawal. We shall be dissecting the issues affecting players in the industry and also developers in the industry, how it has been affecting them, looking at this pervading view that we are having issues, developers are shying away from going into mass housing. We shall be taking a look at this and also what are the causes, why Nigerians are finding it very difficult to own a home. It promises to be an interesting conversation. Just sit back, relax. I'll be back after this time out.
The rapid growth of the real estate sector often follows economic expansion and urbanization in developing countries. The growth often cuts across commercial and residential property. However, many observers note that the growth of the real estate sector in Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, lacks that of many other comparable countries. Ayo Lawal is the Managing Director, Savvy Real Estate Limited, a seasoned professional in real estate development.
My name is Ayo Lawal. I am the Managing Director of Savvy Real Estate Limited. So background into Savvy Real Estate, we were incorporated in January 2016 with the Corporate Affairs Commission. As the name suggests, we are a development company. We are also into real estate consultancy, management, and also construction, as the name goes. So that's what we are in a nutshell. Well, the inspiration pretty much comes from my background as a real estate training person. I have worked both in the private and public sector of the economy, and I've also worked overseas. And having worked overseas and seeing the kind of standards that houses have been constructed to, it was a bit disappointing to see the prevalent poor homes and designs that is, scattered all around the country. And I thought, well, having learned so much overseas, I could play a little part by constructing homes to the kind of standards that are generally accepted abroad. So that is more or less the inspiration behind Savvy Real Estate as a company. Also, we thought that we needed to bring some innovation into the space. We have a lot of homes which are built with typical brick and mortar, which is understandably why our homes are very expensive. We thought we could adopt some modern technology into the construction of homes in Nigeria, and that is part of what drives us as a business.
Over the years, Savvy Real Estate Limited has maintained consistency in providing solutions to the housing sector across the country with utmost emphasis on quality and trust.
Shortly after our incorporation, we commenced our first scheme. I think a year later we commenced our first scheme in Katampe, which we completed in December 2018. We also are undertaking at the moment a scheme in Gadwa, which is ongoing, and that is the project that we are currently promoting. Well, the challenges are immense. If you ask any developer this question, they'll probably tell you the main challenge is funding, and that is not far from the truth. Yeah, funding remains a big challenge in construction in Nigeria. But beyond funding, I would say, in my experience, one of the main challenge is the lack of skilled and non-skilled tradesmen, or we call them construction workers in Nigeria. That is one of the biggest challenge. What you do find currently is the majority of the good tradesmen in Nigeria are actually from overseas. You have the Togolese and the Ghanaians and the Cote d'Ivoireans. They've pretty much taken over the space, which is a shame, because with the prevalent unemployment in Nigeria, you would have thought that with the amount of construction going on in the country, that is an opportunity for our tradesmen to step up their game and become more useful in the construction space. However, what is Savvy Real Estate doing about this? What we are doing is the Nigerians that work within our company, we try to upskill them by providing training, and we also try to give them good incentives, which keeps them in the space, because what you find is when people do have other opportunities to take other jobs outside the construction industry, then off they go, and that's the talent loss. So we try to incentivize our workers as much as possible, and we also try to provide training to upskill them. Beyond the challenge of funding and tradesmen challenges, there's also the really big challenge of land acquisition. As you will be aware, land is very expensive, which forms a big part of the cost of construction, and not just the cost of the land itself, it's also the title issues. A lot of land have changed hands so many times, which then makes the title defective, or makes it difficult to actually verify these titles. So I would say that the government needs to revisit the Land Use Act 1978 to ensure that it is now compliant with modern times, and to ensure that land is readily available to not just developers but also individuals who can, enter into the space and build homes for themselves.
A range of issues have stunted the growth of real estate markets in Nigeria. The Land Use Act is a legislation that vests ownership of lands across Nigeria in the hands of state governors, is a challenge that complicates the transfer of title and to a varying extent makes lands for development unavailable or very expensive. Other challenges include the current high interest rate environment that increases funding costs for developers and investors.
Firstly, I have to question the statistics, 17 million housing deficit. I wonder where this figure has come from, because we are in a country where we actually don't even know our population as a people. And that's where it starts. For you to do any strategic planning or for you to enact policies, firstly you need to know what your population census is. And the last I checked, I believe we only had a census in 2006. So that's pretty out of date. Census should be run every 10 years. So the number 17 million is hugely estimated, and as such we can't really plan with such figures. But irrespective of what the numbers are, the fact remains that there is a deficit, and the deficit is huge. So what can the government do to reduce this deficit? Firstly, like I mentioned earlier, the Land Use Act 1978 is totally out of date. That's a over 40 years act, which pretty much vests land in urban land in the governor and non-urban land in the local authority. You know that the powers around land, or the interest around land, goes beyond just the governor and the local government. So that needs to be addressed. It's a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed, that can then make housing readily available. But beyond the land, I would also say that Nigeria is the only country where people buy a high-ticketed item like housing at full price. We need to have a mortgage system, and not just a mortgage system that asks or demands double digits. It needs to be realistic. It needs to be a single-digit mortgage system. So that needs to be addressed. It's a fundamental issue why there is a huge deficit, because even when the houses are available, people cannot afford them. So that is in itself needs to be addressed by the government and also all stakeholders in the industry. Another issue which certainly affects development is the infrastructure. We are blessed with vast amounts of land in this country, but most of the land is not accessible. There are no infrastructure to actually undertake development on this land. So again, the government needs to address the infrastructural deficit in this nation, and that is how construction or development or even foreign partners can be encouraged to come in to support whatever government policies are in place to get construction going. And obviously, like I indicated earlier, the innovation in the space needs to be improved. This idea of brick and mortar as the only means to construct houses needs to be debunked. We need to look at other means. When I was growing up, I did see houses built in clay. We have a lot of clay in this nation. Why we've detracted from using clay for construction, I really don't know. That is a means, natural resources that we can harness for some of our development. And there are others. There are many other kind of materials that can make housing cheap. I mean, all of these measures put in place certainly will reduce drastically the huge deficit which we're currently experiencing in this country. If we all come together collectively, both the government and the developers and all the necessary stakeholders, then certainly we would find ourselves in a situation where the deficit is much reduced. Yeah, I think we are in an age, the internet age, social media age as well. There isn't really any reason why any youth who knows their onions should be unemployed or should be roaming the streets without a job, because the last I checked, most youth in this nation have got a mobile phone, and that in itself can get most people gainfully employed. So yeah, the government should provide the enabling environment being security, infrastructure, power, etc. But beyond that, the individuals, the youths, also have to, use whatever God-given talent they have to create employment. It's certain that we are now in a world that the government cannot provide employment for everyone. So we should try within the resources we have. Like I mentioned, we all do have a mobile phone. There's so much that can be done using a mobile phone. There's so much opportunities which the youths can harness by using the very few equipment or gadgets that they take around and carry on. And I'm not even referring to nefarious activities like what is now commonplace, Yahoo, and maybe prostitution. I'm talking about things like e-commerce. There's so much trade that go on. We are now in a global community. So the youths should use simply the meager resources within their that are affordable to them to create employment for themselves. And if they do so, other opportunities would come their way. Well, I'm a very personal person, so I'm not sure how much you want to know. As you're already aware, I am a real estate professional, a chartered surveyor and a developer. That's on a professional level. On a personal level, I am Fumi's husband, Grace's dad. I can somewhat be described as an exercise junkie. I love to run, I love to cycle. I also love to read and travel. I think that's more than enough about myself.
Yeah, sure. Once a very big thank you, sir. This is the time we permit us. Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution on the program. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much again for out of a busy schedule you were able to grant us this interview. We really appreciate it. Thank you and God bless you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, sir.